murderous rampage of Bonnie and Clyde originated back in 1926. That year, Clyde Chestnut Barrel began a string of petty thefts. These thefts landed him in the Eastham prison in April of 1930. The Eastham prison farm was the first maximum security prison in Texas. Because of its grueling work assignments, the treacherous conditions, and the difficulty of escaping the unit, even hardcore criminals dreaded being sent to this facility. While in prison, Clyde was sexually assaulted repeatedly for over a year by a dominant inmate. Having had enough, Clyde fractured the man's skull with a pipe. This was Clyde's first killing. Clyde had met Bonnie just 4 months prior to his incarceration. As they say, it was love at first sight. Clyde was paroled in February 1932. He emerged as a hardened and bitter criminal. Ralph Foltz, a fellow inmate, said that he watched Clyde change from a schoolboy to a rattlesnake. In the public enemy era that ran between 1931 and 1934, Bonnie and Clyde quickly joined the ranks of John Dillinger and Pretty Boy Floyd. After his release, Clyde began forming the Barrow Gang. From 1932 through 1934, the Barrow Gang made a good living by robbing small-town banks. In 1934, Raymond Hamilton, a good friend and accomplice of Clyde's, was sent to Eastham to serve out a 266-year sentence. That year, Bonnie and Clyde raided the farm. During the raid, Raymond escaped along with 3 other prisoners. These prisoners included Joe Palmer, Henry Methvin, and Hilton Bivey. The breakout also signaled the beginning of the end for Bonnie and Clyde. The breakout had depleted all of the funds that the Barrow Gang had. They began to earn money once more by robbing small-town banks. These robberies seemed random, but by now they had devised a system to avoid being captured. After robbing a bank, they would drive several hundred miles away before hitting the next one. While the law was looking for them in one area, they would be safely away in a different part of the country. One of the gang's last successful robberies occurred in Poteau, Oklahoma. The Barrow Gang arrived in town in January of 1934. After arriving, they spent several days roaming throughout the area before deciding on which bank to rob. This is precisely what happened in Poteau, Oklahoma on Thursday, January 25, 1934. Shortly before noon, Clyde and his gang drove a stolen blue Plymouth sedan down Old Highway 112, which is now McKenna Street. Bonnie was not with them. Just before they set out, Bonnie stole a different car and headed towards Worcester. The remaining gang members parked near the front door of Central National Bank. Dressed in expensive-looking suits, Clyde Barrow and Raymond Hamilton got out and calmly walked through the front door. Joe Palmer remained in the car with the engine running, waiting for their return. After entering the bank, Clyde and Raymond raised their guns and pointed them at C.P. Little, a customer, and cashiers May Vassar and W.A. Campbell. Little and Campbell were immediately ordered to lie on the floor while Vassar was allowed to sit in a chair. After quickly subduing the people inside, Clyde moved behind the counter, opened the bank drawers, and stashed the money into the bag. He then forced the employees to open the safe. After the safe was open, he took all of the cash inside. While Clyde was busy emptying the drawers, another customer entered the bank. Pat Folsom was oblivious as to what was going on at first, but once he saw Raymond's shotgun, he quickly understood. He soon joined C.P. Little on the floor. Outside, J.M. Butler became suspicious after seeing the mud-covered blue Plymouth sedan parked alongside the bank. The rear window of the car was knocked out. Butler thought that it was possible that a machine gun was probably concealed in the car. This suspicion prompted Butler to grab a gun and then enter the bank. During this time, Clyde was busy emptying the vault, which left Raymond alone to guard the hostages. Butler entered the bank, but wasn't prepared for what greeted him as he walked through the door. Raymond was waiting. He promptly relieved Butler of his gun and forced him to join the others on the floor. In all, the robbery took less than 15 minutes. Clyde and Raymond exited the front of the bank with $1,500 and ran down McKenna Street to the waiting car. Anticipating a lengthy chase and possible gunfight, They stopped briefly to put the front windshield down so that they could shoot their guns if needed to. Joel Palmer was already on the move when Clyde and Raymond jumped in the car. They quickly made their escape by heading south on Old Highway 112 towards the small town of Worcester. Having been notified of the robbery, E.G. Goodnight, president of the bank at the time, accompanied officers as they chased the bandits. The chase lasted around 10 minutes before the officers gave up. It soon became obvious that Clyde had lost them somewhere near the hills of Worcester. Several days after the robbery, Zadok Harrison discovered the blue Plymouth 1 mile north of Page, about 300 to 400 yards from the road. In typical Bonnie and Clyde fashion, Bonnie was stationed outside of the town with a getaway car. After the robbery, the gang had ditched the blue sedan and transferred everything to the black car that Bonnie had stolen. A week after the Poteau robbery, the group returned to Iowa where they robbed another bank and got away with $307. For the next 4 months, Bonnie and Clyde would continue terrorizing the Midwest. Poteau was the gang's last successful robbery. Later robberies would either end in failure or would only net them a few $100s. Their final demise would come 4 months after the robbery in Poteau. Bonnie and Clyde's reign of terror ended with a bloody shootout on May 24, 1934, when the couple were ambushed and gunned down in Gibbsland, Louisiana.
The inevitable end. Retribution. Here is Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker, who died as they lived, by the gun. Clyde Barrow's mania, his guns, spiked at last by the law. 2 sawed-off shotguns, 2 machine rifles, 10 automatic pistols, and 1,500 rounds of ammunition. The Barrow and Parker death car. Every one of these holes was made by the steel-jacketed bullets from the high-powered rifles in the hands of the officers. Many of these bullets passed entirely through the door on Clyde's side, through Clyde's body, struck Bonnie, passed through her body, then out through the door on her side of the car. The officers were on the left side of the road, nearest the driver. This explains the fact that Bonnie's body had more bullet holes than Clyde's. Any one of these bullets would have been fatal to both, but after having killed 14 people, most of whom were officers of the law, and having come safely through so many gun battles, it did not seem advisable to fire just 1 bullet.